An Israeli soldier who fatally shot a wounded Palestinian is convicted of manslaughter. His trial has deeply divided Israel. So, is the guilty soldier a hero, or did he breach army rules? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Jane Dutton. It's been a closely watched trial with an unusual verdict. Unlike previous cases where soldiers are acquitted, an Israeli army sergeant has been convicted of the manslaughter of a Palestinian man. Elor Azaria shot Abed al-Fattah al-Sharif in the head as he lay on the ground wounded. A second Palestinian was also shot and killed in Hebron. Police say al-Sharif stabbed an Israeli guard at a checkpoint. Now, the court case highlights deep divisions among Israelis. Army generals say the army sergeant who opened fire broke the code of war. Far-right politicians claim the video of the shooting made him a scapegoat. What does the guilty verdict say about Israeli society and its relationship to Palestinians? We'll get to our guests in just a moment, but first, Andrew Simmons sets up the story for us from Tel Aviv.
They went through every shred of evidence that the defence put through for Elor Azaria, the 20-year-old who maintained throughout that he was innocent as charged. However, what was said time and time again through this 2.5-hour summary of the evidence, a judgment that was that all of his accounts didn't add up. Firstly, he claimed that his victim was dead, that al-Sharif was lying there dead. Then he also claimed that he was a threat, that he had a knife, but that knife was some considerable distance away. Then he said that he may have been wearing a suicide vest, and that's why he was responding. But this was 11 minutes after al-Sharif had been shot by other soldiers and disabled him on the ground, bleeding. The man was bleeding while ambulance staff were attending to an Israeli soldier who had minor wounds.
Let's now bring in our guests. Joining us in Tel Aviv, Akiva Eldar. He's a senior columnist for the Al Monitor. Also in Tel Aviv, Robbie Sabel, professor at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. A very warm welcome. Akiva Eldar, I'm just wondering what your response is to the conviction. Is it enough?
Well, I think that it's not enough, definitely not. First of all, we have to wait and see what's the final verdict, because if it will turn out that Azaria will go back home or with some very symbolic penalty, that will be a message that you can still get away with murder in Israel if the victim is a Palestinian. So we have some former precedents that soldiers that were convicted were punished very lightly, mildly saying. Now, the other thing is, I just looked at the figures of B'Tselem and Yesh Din, the Israeli NGOs that are doing a wonderful job monitoring the occupation, and the figures of 2015, for instance, that there were 116 fatalities, Palestinians killed in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, and less than 20% of them were convicted. So there is a lot more to be done. I hope that this will be the first step.
Robbie Sabel, what do you feel as far as this conviction is concerned, and do you think it's enough?
I think there's 2 points to be made. First of all, there was no question that if there was no danger, a soldier is not allowed to kill a terrorist once he's been disabled. In other words, this wasn't the issue. It was absolutely clear that once a terrorist is disabled, it is forbidden, it's against Israeli military law, against law to kill him. So the question was a factual question. Did this particular soldier have good grounds to believe that there was a danger? And it was debatable. But the court came, I think, to a very correct and courageous decision that there was not sufficient danger for him to warrant to allow him to kill the terrorist. The second point is, I think it's fair enough. It would be fair to give credit to an Israeli military court, despite tremendous public support for the soldier, that decided such behavior is illegal. It's against the rules of the Israeli army. Because, after all, we're talking about a terrorist, and we had at the time a wave of terrorism, killing, stabbing civilians, and there's no doubt that this man who was killed had stabbed somebody. Nevertheless, I think we should take our hat off to an Israeli military court who said that is not the sort of behavior that is expected of Israeli soldiers.
You said it was a factual question. How much of a moral question was it as well?
There wasn't a moral question. That's the interesting point. There's no doubt that if there was no danger, a soldier is not allowed to use force against a terrorist, even though he was clearly had been a terrorist. The only justification is, was there a clear and immediate and imminent danger? If there had been, his behavior would have been justified. The court came to the factual decision that there was no immediate danger, then there was no question at all. It was illegal to use force.
Akiva, I want us to look at the video very quickly of what happened. And it really lays out for us the scenario and the fact that it does become a factual issue, as Robbie was saying. Let's just watch it for a little bit and I'll bring you in a little afterwards. Akiva, how much of what happened is violating the military code of conduct in your view? And if it is violating the code of conduct, what sort of impact will it have on the military?
Well, I've been, covering the conflict for many years. I traveled in the occupied territories. And what I can say is that there is not actually a code of conduct, and I don't think that one should expect any code of conduct when you have this kind of situation. I think that, first of all, the people who should be tried are the leaders, our leaders. I fully agree with Professor Sable that the court has done a wonderful job, and the message is very important. But having said that, you put young soldiers in situations that even adults, they are 18, 19 years old boys, they're boys, just finished high school, and you put them at the heart of a volcanic mountain, Hebron. They're in a juncture where Palestinians, settlers, and some of them terrorists, not all of them, of course, and the army are meeting in an impossible situation, under tension, and people are making mistakes. I'm not going to justify Azaria, of course, and I think that what he did is terrible. But I think that maybe what we have to do is to put this in the context of, for instance, the Security Council resolution regarding the expansion of settlements and the abolition of houses in Area C. And maybe this should send a message to all of us, Israelis, that we shouldn't see this kind of footage, and we shouldn't expect those, because, it could be somebody else.
Okay.
And there
okay,
are
you raise many
other
points
people
there,
who are doing so,
and good
they
points.
were
And let
lucky
me put,
because
sorry,
there was
if I
no
may,
footage.
let me put these to Robbie. Firstly, who do you think should be held accountable, and what do you make of that point that some of these, I mean, no older than kids, are put into a very difficult situation? Hebron is seen as a hotspot. Are they out of their depth there? Does this push them to take this sort of action?
We have a conflict with the Palestinians. There's no point in concealing it. There are controversial issues, but I think there's now worldwide support. Whatever happens, you don't use terrorism. You don't stab people. You don't go up to civilians and stab them in the back. And that's what was happening here. This is being fought by the Israeli army, by the Israeli police, and by police in all democratic nations. We are facing a worldwide scourge of terrorism. And whatever political contest might be behind it, it never justifies it. maybe acting out of hope for motherhood and for Mother Teresa. You don't go stabbing civilians. You don't stab people. And this is what's happening. So the issue is terrorism. We have to fight it. But what Israel has done is fight it within the law. In other words, we've strict instructions to our soldiers and to our police. Yes, you can neutralize, you can take action, you can kill a terrorist if there's a real danger. When there's no longer a danger, you don't use force against him. And that I think, is the message of this military tribunal.
Let's bring in our third guest from Hebron, the scene of that action. Issa Amra, Palestinian human rights activist and founder of the Camera Project. Firstly, what is your response to the conviction? What happened in your territory there?
I think it's a false conviction. The Israeli legal system is supporting the occupation. As Palestinians, we are not only suffering from one soldier, we are suffering from all the soldiers who are occupying our own homes and our own cities, our own streets. I think who's responsible about the killing of the Palestinians is not Elor Azaria only, it's the occupation, it's the military system in the occupied territories. That is my response. I don't believe in the Israeli court. I believe that the Israeli courts are found to support the occupation and to support the expansion of the Israeli settlement.
Your videographer, somebody you trained, caught this footage. Do you think we would have reached this point if the footage hadn't been released? And tell us what he went through after he released this, the death threats that he faced.
The extrajudicial execution is happening from 1967, even happened before. And as Palestinians, we found it a tool to document the human rights violation and to document the extrajudicial execution. We have many cases filmed, many cases documented of Israeli soldiers shooting Palestinians without any accountability. And we have a famous case of Hadil al-Hashlamoun, who was killed maybe 100 meters from the same incident of Elor Azaria killing a Palestinian. I think the camera is the most trustful witness and telling the truth about what is happening in Palestine and what is happening in Hebron all the time. But it's not the first case and it will not be the last case.
Robbie, if that hadn't been captured, do you think we would have seen the sort of action that we've seen today, the public outcry?
It's worthwhile noting that the Israeli army immediately reported that there had been an unusual incident against army regulations before they knew there was a film of it. In other words, this is against, and the Israeli army has no interest in its soldiers behaving as they did. It's against Israeli army sanctions. I would also add that we welcome films. You can film cameramen are welcome to film things. It was used as evidence. We have to make sure hasn't been doctored, but in principle, there's no problem with photographing.
Now, Israeli soldiers face repeated criticism for what Palestinians and others say is unfair and discriminatory treatment. Akiva touched on these numbers a little bit earlier on, but I think they're worth repeating. The Israeli human rights group Yesh Din says the prosecution rate against soldiers is exceptionally low. Yesh Din says the army opened almost 200 investigations into suspected crimes against Palestinians in 2015. Only 4 led to formal charges. Yesh Din says 76 Palestinians were killed in confrontations with soldiers in the occupied West Bank in 2015, but only 21 deaths were investigated. Akiva, I'm just wondering what sort of message this is, and do you think this allows those in the army, in the military, to behave in a different manner, in a manner that breaks international law?
I think that what we should appreciate is the statement of the Chief of Staff, who made the statement yesterday, Eisenkot, and said that Azaria is not a hero. He is not our boy. He's not our son. And, this shouldn't be taken for granted these days. I just want to remind the viewers that Mr. Avigdor Lieberman, who is now our Minister of Defense, went to visit Azaria in court and defended him. And what worries me is the fact that we had people demonstrating around the court and even blocking a highway in Tel Aviv and turning Azaria into not just a victim, but an icon. And the Israeli society is now divided between people who say that, they're quite satisfied, like Robbie said, that this is a clear definition of law. This reflects the rule of law in Israel, and we don't accept this kind of behavior. And other people who say, well, the private is paying the price, while a few years ago there were very senior officials of the Israeli Secret Service who were pardoned after they were also taken. It wasn't a video, but there was the footage showing them, a photograph, a snapshot, showing that they have executed Palestinian who attacked a bus, but they were walking on their feet and there was no threat on their life. And people are saying, well, you are punishing the private while the generals are getting away with it.
Let's talk a little bit about Hebron after Yoshe Yalon, the former defense minister, said that the country has been taken over by extremists. I mean, is this something that you are seeing in Hebron? Because we really are seeing the occupation playing out there. The day-to-day realities on the ground is happening in Hebron. Give us a sense of what goes on there on a daily basis and the different sides and how they're treated.
The Palestinians in Hebron, they are suffering from extrajudicial execution. Many Palestinians were killed at a checkpoint without any kind of accountability on the Israeli soldiers or the Israeli settlers. The Palestinians are jailed inside their homes. You need to be registered and to have a number to pass the checkpoint to come into your house. Your relatives, your friends, the doctors, the teachers are not allowed to pass the checkpoint. Even to get an ambulance. It's a big mission in Hebron with daily attacks from the Israeli soldiers, daily attacks from the Israeli settlers. The settlers are attacking the Palestinians since ages, not only with the right-wing government, even with the left-wing government, Palestinians were suffering. We all remember, and in 1 month and a half will be the anniversary of the Ibrahimi Mosque massacre, where Baruch Goldstein killed 29 Palestinians. And after that massacre, Hebron was completely closed. We can talk about 1,800 shops closed because of the closure policy, more than 100 movement barriers in the city, more than 20 checkpoints in the city, and 1,000 Palestinian apartments became empty. So we are suffering from displacement and land taking and ethnic cleansing in Hebron since long time, and it's happening, and the Israeli right wing is speeding up the attacks on the Palestinians.
Robbie, I mean, you hear that, and it really is just not acceptable, is it? And while you can never condone any sort of violence, I mean, you wonder how Palestinians can respond if their voice is taken away from them. The fact that some of them are pushed to the point where they're so desperate that they take out a knife against a soldier holding a gun. I mean, what does that say about what's going through their minds and the situation they live in?
I would like to repeat what I said earlier. Nothing justifies terrorism. There are disputes throughout the world. There's people acting out of various motives and reasons. They may feel they're correct. You don't go and stab people. And if there is terrorism, you have to fight it. And if you look at Israel's record compared with other democracies, I'm not comparing it to totalitarian states, Israel's rate is outstanding. Try and look at how many other democracies have tried
outstanding
their own
in what way? I mean, there's an illegal occupation of the West Bank. Settlements are illegal. That's breaking international law. So I'm not sure what you're referring to.
By the way, the occupation is, call it illegal. Even the United Nations General Assembly and Security Council have refrained, because in times of combat, times of military conflict, you can occupy territory. It's not a healthy situation. We have to end it. We need negotiations that will reach a viable Palestinian state, and the Israeli government and most Israeli public is in favor. But that requires to be negotiation. In the meantime, occupation is not a healthy phenomena, but it's not illegal. But that's not the main issue. The Palestinians will not achieve a state by stabbing Israeli civilians and putting bombs in cafeterias. And there are many Palestinians, and I'm in contact with them, who realize it. They'll have to negotiate, reach difficult decisions. Israeli politicians will have to reach difficult decisions, but it won't be achieved by stabbing people in the back.
Talking about a Palestinian state, a two-state solution doesn't seem plausible at the moment. I mean, geographically, I don't even think it's possible, also considering the rapid growth of settlements. What are we looking at here going forward, and that's going to lead to any reconciliation? And let's, of course, not forget that Trump is coming into power.
First of all, I'm not sure if Messiah Trump can reverse decisions, resolutions that were taken by the Security Council. Of course, he cannot stop unions, universities, NGOs, as well as the EU from boycotting the settlements. And I believe that once the Israelis will realize that the price that they are paying for the occupation, for instance, the discussion we are doing now, the fact that we have to, not to justify, but to try and make sense in what's happening in Hebron, maybe this will be a wake-up call to the Israelis as well as to the Palestinians to do negotiate a two-state solution. I disagree with this diagnosis that the two-state solution is dead. It is very sick, indeed. The settlers and the right-wing government are not offering solutions, they are offering more problems. But fortunately enough, 80% of the settlers live in about 6 to 7% of the occupied territories. So Sharon did get the settlers out of Gaza. Menachem Begin got the settlers out of Sinai. So what we need is leadership, and what we need is an international community that will insist that Israel will stop expanding the settlements and the Palestinians to stop stabbing people.
And maybe you need an Israeli leader who will listen to that sort of criticism. Issa, let me bring you in here, and I'm going to pick up on Akiva's point of possibly this presents a wake-up call to all sides. Could this lead to any reconciliation between the Palestinians and the Israelis, and between the Israelis who are divided at the moment, divided over this issue?
I think the Israelis who are the ones who should wake up. As Palestinians, we are under the occupation. We don't have any rights. We are the ones who are killed. We are the ones who are completely restricted. We don't have any human rights. I think the international community should act and make Israel accountable for their human rights violation, for their occupation. And the main issue is the occupation, not the Palestinian stabbers, not the Palestinian violence. And the occupation is supporting settlement. The occupation is supporting the soldiers who are killing Palestinians. So let's talk about the occupation. They should, wake up to end the occupation and solve the problem in Palestine.
Robbie, could this provide some sort of reconciliation? I must ask you as well, what's going to happen next? Robbie, do you think this could provide a wake-up call and some sort of reconciliation? We've seen huge divisions within Israeli society over this court case and the events leading up to it.
I don't think so, frankly. I think the wake-up call will be when both Israeli and Palestinian leaders realize they have to solve these problems by negotiation. It's not one terrorist one action and one soldier's reaction that is going to cause the politicians to take that difficult decisions. It's realization that we can reach an agreement. I was lucky enough to be way back on the talks with Egypt when nobody thought we could reach peace with Egypt. We did. Akiva followed it at the time as the correspondent for Haaretz. We achieved difficult decisions and we reached peace with Egypt. I believe we can do the same with the Palestinians.
Wouldn't that be wonderful? Robbie Sabo, thank you very much. Akiva Eldar and Issa Amro. Thank you for talking to us on Inside Story, and thank you too for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. For further discussion, please go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Jane Dutton, and the rest of the team, thanks for watching. Bye-bye.